For thousands of years, humanity has believed it understands its own origins. We're taught that civilization followed a clear path, from primitive survival to organized societies, from simple tools to towering monuments. But scattered across the planet are discoveries that refuse to follow that story. Objects created with impossible precision. Cities that appear long before history claims they should exist. And monuments so old, they challenge what we believe early humans were capable of imagining, let alone building. These are not myths passed down through folklore, nor theories born from speculation. They are real places, real artifacts, and real mysteries, studied, measured, and debated by experts who still cannot agree on their meaning. Some suggest lost knowledge. Others whisper of forgotten cultures erased by time. And if you question whether human history is far older and far stranger than we've ever been told. Tonight, we step beyond the comfort of accepted timelines and into a world where the past refuses to silence. A journey across continents and millennia into 7 discoveries that don't fit, don't align, and don't explain themselves. Settle in, let the noise of the modern world fade, and prepare to explore the ancient mysteries that still watch us, waiting to be understood. In the central region of Russia, near the eastern slopes of the Ural Mountains, lies a landscape shaped by retreating ice and ancient water. Thousands of years ago, as the last ice loosened its grip on Eurasia, vast peat bogs formed across this region. These wetlands swallowed forests, animals, and occasionally, traces of human activity. One such bog would become the unlikely guardian of a discovery that rewrote what archaeologists believed about prehistoric humanity in 1890. Workers extracting peat near the Shigir Lake uncovered fragments of carved wood buried deep within the waterlogged soil. At first, the pieces appeared unremarkable, broken timbers preserved by chance. No one suspected that these fragments belonged to one of the oldest monumental artworks ever created by human hands. Only when the pieces were carefully cleaned and assembled did their true nature emerge. What stood before researchers was a towering wooden figure, carved from a single massive larch tree. When reconstructed, the sculpture measured over 5 meters tall. This alone was astonishing. Wood rarely survives more than a few centuries under normal conditions, yet here was an object preserved for more than 10,000 years. Its survival was made possible by the bog itself. The acidic, oxygen-deprived mud prevented bacteria from breaking down the wood, sealing the idol in a natural vault of time. But its preservation was only the beginning of the mystery. The surface of the idol was covered in deliberate carvings, straight lines, zigzags, chevrons, and repeating geometric patterns running from top to bottom. These were not decorative flourishes. They followed a structured logic, arranged in sections as if forming a visual language. Most striking of all were the faces. Several human-like faces were carved into the wood, stacked vertically along the body. Their eyes were hollow, their expressions calm but penetrating. They did not resemble portraits. They resembled symbols RADIOCARBON, dating initially placed the idol at around 9,000 years old. Even at that age, it surpassed any known wooden sculpture in existence. Later testing pushed the date back even further, more than 12,000 years ago. This placed its creation at the very edge of the Mesolithic period, a time when humans in northern Eurasia lived as hunter-gatherers, moving seasonally across forests and rivers in small groups, according to traditional models of history. Such societies were focused almost entirely on survival. Food, shelter, and basic tools were believed to dominate their lives. Monumental art, complex symbolism, and abstract belief systems were thought to belong to much later agricultural civilizations. The Shigir idol directly contradicts that narrative. Creating this sculpture required planning, skill, and time. The tree used was already more than a century old when it was cut. Shaping it into a 5-meter monument using only stone tools demanded technical expertise passed down through generations. The carvings themselves show precision and consistency, indicating that the creator was following established methods rather than improvising. This raises a critical question. Why? A monument of this scale would have dominated the surrounding landscape. It would have been visible from afar, standing as a focal point in a world otherwise defined by temporary camps and organic materials. Its purpose must have been significant enough to justify such effort. Archaeologists have proposed several interpretations. Some believe the idol represents a cosmological map, a visual representation of the universe divided into layers, the sky above, the world of humans, and an underworld below. The stacked faces may represent spirits, ancestors, or beings associated with each realm. The geometric patterns between them could serve as boundaries or pathways linking these worlds. Others suggest the idol functioned as a warning or guardian figure, marking sacred territory or dangerous boundaries. In many ancient cultures, symbolic figures were used to communicate rules, taboos, or shared myths without written language. The Shigir idol may have served as a silent storyteller, encoding knowledge through symbols, understood only by its community. There is also the possibility that it played a role in ritual gatherings. Seasonal meetings between groups were common among hunter-gatherers, used for trade, storytelling, and social bonding. A monument like this could have acted as a central marker of identity, a reminder of shared beliefs in a world without permanent settlements. The patterns carved into the idol are not unique in form. Similar zigzags and geometric motifs appear across early Eurasian art, from cave engravings to later pottery designs. These shapes are often associated with altered states of consciousness. Shamanic traditions, or symbolic representations of natural forces like water, movement, and transformation. If this interpretation is correct, then the Shigir idol is not simply art. It is evidence of structured belief systems, early philosophy. Carved into wood, the mystery deepens when considering how the idol ended up in the bog. Some researchers believe it was intentionally placed there as an offering. Wetlands have long been associated with spiritual significance, viewed as thresholds between worlds. Others argue it once stood upright on dry land and eventually collapsed into the swamp as the landscape changed over centuries. What remains certain is that the idol was never meant to be disposable. Its creation contradicts the idea that early humans lacked the capacity for long-term thinking or abstract expression. Instead, it suggests a society that invested energy into meaning, memory, and identity. Today, the Shigir idol stands fragmented but enduring, its carved eyes still confronting modern viewers. We can measure its age, analyze its material, and map its patterns, but its message remains locked away. Whatever knowledge it once carried has been severed from its cultural context, leaving only silent geometry behind. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. How much of early human thought has been lost simply because it was never written down? How many belief systems rose and vanished without leaving cities or monuments of stone? And how many assumptions about primitive societies are built on absence rather than evidence? The Shigir idol does not offer answers. Instead, it challenges certainty itself. A reminder that the deeper we dig into the past, the more fragile our timelines become, and this is only the beginning. On the outskirts of modern-day Amman, Jordan, lies the remains of an ancient settlement that once stood at the forefront of human transformation. Known today as Ain Ghazal, meaning Spring of the Gazelle, this site was home to one of the largest and most complex communities of the pre-pottery Neolithic period. Thousands of years before writing, metallurgy, or formal states, the people of Ain Ghazal were already redefining how humans lived together. Between roughly 7,250 and 5,000 BC. Ain Ghazal grew from a modest village into a sprawling settlement covering more than 30 acres. It sat beside the Zarqa River, a vital source of water that allowed its inhabitants to cultivate crops and raise animals. These people were among the earliest farmers in the region, growing cereals and domesticating goats, while still supplementing their diet through hunting. Their houses were rectangular, built from mud brick, with carefully plastered floors, a sign of planning, permanence, and shared labor. But it was not the houses, tools, or graves that would make Ain Ghazal one of the most important archaeological sites in the world. It was what lay hidden beneath them. In 1983, during construction work for a highway, bulldozers cut into the edge of the ancient settlement. Archaeologists were called to investigate what initially appeared to be routine remains. 2 years later, during expanded excavations, They uncovered something extraordinary, a cache of human-shaped statues buried beneath the floors of abandoned houses. These figures were unlike anything seen before. They were life-sized, standing roughly 1 meter tall with elongated bodies, narrow shoulders, and long necks. Their forms were built around a core of bundled reeds, coated in layers of lime plaster. The faces were stylized, but unmistakably human, with prominent noses, carefully shaped mouths, and wide, dark eyes made from bitumen. Some figures had single heads. Others had two twin faces emerging from a single torso, staring outward in opposite directions. In total, dozens of these statues were found, buried together in groups, sealed under layers of earth. There were no signs that they ever been displayed for long. No damage from weather. No gradual accumulation of debris. The evidence suggested something deliberate. The statues were created, used briefly and then intentionally, buried. Radiocarbon dating placed their creation between 7,250 and 6,500 BC. This meant they were made thousands of years before the invention of writing and centuries before the rise of the first cities. At that point in history, humans were still experimenting with agriculture, social hierarchy, and communal identity. Yet here was proof that abstract thought and symbolic expression were already deeply ingrained. The effort required to make these statues cannot be overstated. Lime plaster does not occur naturally. It must be produced by heating limestone to temperatures exceeding 800 degrees Celsius, a process that consumes enormous amounts of fuel. For a Neolithic community living in a semi-arid environment, burning wood at this scale represented a serious investment of resources. The choice to do so implies that the statues served a purpose far more important than decoration. But what was that purpose? Archaeologists have proposed multiple interpretations, none of them definitive. One theory suggests that the statues represented ancestors. Beneath many houses at Engazl, human burials were found, often with skulls removed, plastered, and sometimes painted. This practice is known from other Neolithic sites across the Levant, such as Jericho, and is thought to reflect ancestor veneration. The belief that the dead continue to influence the living in this context. The statues may have acted as substitutes for the deceased, physical embodiments that allowed ancestors to remain present within the community. Their burial beneath house floors would place them literally at the foundation of daily life. Another interpretation views the figures not as individuals, but as symbolic beings, representations of fertility, renewal, or protective spirits. The uniformity of their posture and proportions suggests they were not portraits. No two statues are exactly alike, but all follow the same visual language. Their blank expressions and exaggerated eyes give them an otherworldly quality, as if they were meant to observe rather than interact. The double-headed figures deepen the mystery. Some scholars believe they symbolize duality, life and death, earth and sky, male and female, past and future. In early belief systems, such oppositions were often seen as complementary forces necessary for balance. If so, these statues may reflect an early attempt to conceptualize the structure of the universe itself, the context of Engazl's development adds another layer to the story. During the centuries the settlement thrived, the Near East was undergoing rapid change. Farming spread across the Fertile Crescent. Populations grew. Social roles became more specialized. With these changes came new forms of tension, competition for land, resources, and authority. Environmental evidence suggests that by around 6500 BC, Engazl was under strain. Deforestation from fuel use and overgrazing began to degrade the surrounding landscape. Soil fertility declined. Food production became less reliable. The community started to shrink, and parts of the settlement were abandoned. It is possible that the statues were created during this period of uncertainty. In times of crisis, societies often turn to ritual as a means of restoring balance or appealing to unseen forces. The act of creating, using, and then burying the statues may have been part of a ceremony intended to protect the community or mark the end of an era. The craftsmanship of the statues reveals remarkable technical skill. The plaster surfaces were smoothed and polished. Subtle traces of red pigment suggest that lips or other features were once painted. The eyes, made of bitumen, give the figures a piercing gaze that feels intentional, as though they were designed to watch ceremonies or participants during rituals. These were not experimental objects. They were the result of planning, collaboration, and shared knowledge. Dozens of people must have contributed to their creation, quarrying limestone, gathering fuel, firing kilns, shaping reeds, and applying plaster in stages. The statues represent not just belief, but organization. What makes Ain Ghazal truly extraordinary is its place in human history. These figures sit at a turning point after humanity began settling down, but before the rise of formal religion and state power. They suggest that the need to represent ideas, ancestors, and forces beyond the physical world emerged almost as soon as people began living together permanently. Today, the statues survive only in fragments and reconstructions. They are displayed behind glass, stripped of their original context. But their presence still unsettles modern viewers. They remind us that the human impulse to create meaning did not begin with writing or temples. It began in mud brick houses, in shared rituals, in silent figures buried beneath the floor. The people of Ain Ghazal left no text to explain themselves. Their statues speak instead, not in words but in form. And what they tell us is clear. Long before civilization had a name, humans were already asking questions about identity, memory, and the unseen. East of Lima, high in the Andes Mountains of Peru, there exists a vast plateau rising more than 4,000 meters above sea level. Known locally as Marawasi, this windswept expanse of exposed volcanic rock stretches across several square kilometers. The landscape is harsh and unforgiving. Vegetation is sparse. Clouds move quickly across the sky, and sunlight can shift from blinding brightness to deep shadow in minutes. It is a place where perception changes constantly, and that instability lies at the heart of its mystery. Scattered across the plateau are enormous stone formations that appear, at first glance, to resemble familiar forms. A massive human profile with a pronounced nose and chin. A crouching animal that looks unmistakably like a frog. Another formation that seems to depict a lion. And most striking of all, a towering cliff face that appears to contain multiple human faces looking in different directions. Often referred to as the monument to humanity. Whether these shapes are intentional or accidental has been debated for over half a century. Geologically, Marawasi is composed of volcanic tuff, a relatively soft rock formed when layers of ash settled and hardened after ancient eruptions. Over millions of years, wind, rain, temperature changes, and seismic activity fractured and eroded the rock, carving it into dramatic forms. Geologists argue that these forces alone are sufficient to explain the plateau's strange appearance. Humans, they say, are prone to pareidolia, the psychological tendency to perceive recognizable patterns, especially faces where none were deliberately created. Yet, this explanation has never fully satisfied everyone. The site entered wider public awareness in the mid-20th century when Peruvian explorer and researcher Daniel Russo documented the plateau extensively. Russo was convinced that the formations were not purely natural. He photographed dozens of shapes, mapped their positions, and argued that they represented sculptures created by an extremely ancient civilization, possibly predating all known Andean cultures. He believed the figures were symbolic, intended to communicate universal ideas about humanity, nature, and cosmic cycles. Russo's claims were met with skepticism from the academic community, but the images he published sparked global fascination. Even critics acknowledge that some formations appear unusually precise when viewed from specific angles. The illusion strengthens at certain times of day, when shadows sharpen outlines and transform abstract rock into recognizable profiles. What complicates the debate is the undeniable evidence of human activity on and around the plateau. Archaeological surveys have uncovered stone ruins, terraces, burial sites, and small ceremonial structures scattered across Marawasi. Pottery fragments and tools link the area to pre-Columbian cultures that lived in the region long before the rise of the Inca. These remains confirm that people visited inhabited or used the plateau for ritual purposes over extended periods. This raises an important question. Even if the rock formations began as natural features, did ancient people recognize them as meaningful? Across the Andes, mountains were not seen as inert landscapes. They were living entities known as apis, powerful spirits that governed weather, fertility, and fate. Many Andean societies shaped natural features to enhance their symbolic significance, carving steps, niches, and altars into rock faces that were already considered sacred. In such contexts, the line between natural and human-made becomes intentionally blurred. At Marahuasi, minimal modification could have dramatically amplified existing shapes. A few strategic cuts, the removal of excess rock, or even ritual framing through pathways and viewing points might have been enough to turn coincidence into meaning. Over thousands of years, erosion would erase most signs of human intervention, leaving behind forms that appear both natural and intentional. The plateau's location strengthens this interpretation. From its high vantage point, the surrounding mountain ranges align with solar and lunar movements throughout the year. Clear night skies offer exceptional views of stars and celestial events. Many Andean cultures placed great importance on astronomy, using elevated sites for observation and ritual. If Marahuasi served such a function, the rock formations may have been integrated into ceremonies. Tied to cycles of time and the cosmos. The monument to humanity remains the most controversial feature. This immense cliff appears to display several human faces of different proportions, as if representing multiple identities. Some observers claim to see profiles that resemble different ethnic types, suggesting a symbolic message about humanity as a whole. Others argue this interpretation says more about the viewer than the stone itself. Lighting plays a critical role. Under direct sunlight, the faces appear sharp and unmistakable. Under cloud cover or shifting shadow, they dissolve into abstraction. This variability has kept the debate alive, as neither side can definitively prove its case. Excavations near the plateau suggest seasonal rather than permanent habitation. Circular stone dwellings, offering stones, and tombs containing pottery indicate that people likely traveled to Marahuasi for specific purposes, rituals, ceremonies, or pilgrimages. The journey itself would have been arduous, reinforcing the site's significance. Reaching such altitude required effort, intention, and commitment. This pattern mirrors sacred landscapes worldwide, where difficult access enhances spiritual meaning. The isolation of Marahuasi, combined with its dramatic visuals, would have created a powerful psychological impact. For ancient visitors, the appearance of faces in stone may not have been dismissed as illusion. It may have been interpreted as evidence of presence, ancestors, spirits, or gods embedded in the mountain itself. Modern science cannot conclusively resolve the mystery. Geological processes explain how such shapes can form naturally. Archaeology confirms human presence but cannot prove large-scale carving. No inscriptions survive. No tools directly linked to sculpting the formations have been found. What remains is ambiguity. Marahuasi exists at the boundary between nature and culture, perception and intention. Whether the formations are the result of erosion alone or the faded remnants of deliberate design, they played a role in human belief. Ancient people interacted with this landscape, assigned meaning to it, and incorporated it into their spiritual world. Perhaps the real mystery is not whether humans carved the stone, but whether meaning requires carving at all. Sometimes the act of recognizing a shape, naming it, and building ritual around it is enough to transform landscape into monument. At Marahuasi, the mountains do not speak clearly. They offer suggestions, and in doing so, they remind us that ancient belief systems were not always imposed upon nature. Often, they emerged from it. In the heart of Cappadocia, a region of central Turkey, known for its surreal landscapes and soft volcanic rock, lies one of the most astonishing architectural achievements of the ancient world. Beneath the rolling plains and stone-carved villages is Derinkuyu, an underground city extending more than 60 meters below the surface, with at least 18 levels carved into the earth. From above, nothing hints at what lies below. No monumental entrance, no towering ruins, just ordinary ground concealing a hidden, Metropolis. Derinku was accidentally rediscovered in 1963 when a local resident renovating his home knocked down a wall and uncovered a narrow passage. That passage led to another, and then another, descending into darkness. What archaeologists eventually mapped defied belief. A vast, interconnected network of tunnels, chambers, staircases, and shafts capable of sheltering an estimated 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food supplies. The city was not a crude refuge. It was a fully functional environment designed for long-term habitation. Living quarters were arranged around central corridors. Storage rooms held grain and oil. Wine and oil presses were carved directly into the rock. Stables occupied lower levels, keeping animals separate from human living spaces. Even more remarkably, Derinku contained schools, kitchens, meeting halls, and places of worship. One of the most impressive engineering features is its ventilation system. A central shaft extends from the surface to the deepest levels, providing fresh air throughout the city. This shaft also served as a well, allowing access to water without exposing inhabitants to the surface. The design ensured that even if the city were sealed, life below could continue. Defense was clearly a priority. Narrow passageways forced intruders to move single file. Massive circular stone doors, weighing hundreds of kilograms, could be rolled into place from inside to block access. These doors had small holes in the center, allowing defenders to attack while remaining protected. The precision of this design raises immediate questions. Who planned this city? And what threats required such an extreme solution? Archaeological evidence suggests that the earliest sections of Derinku may date back to the Hittite period. Around the 2nd millennium BC, however, the city did not remain static. It was expanded, modified, and reused over centuries by different cultures. The Phrygians, early Christians, and Byzantine communities all left their mark, adapting the space to their needs. For early Christians fleeing Roman persecution, Derinku offered safety. Entire communities could disappear underground for months, leaving no trace on the surface. Hidden entrances, camouflaged ventilation openings, and sealed passageways made detection nearly impossible. Yet persecution alone does not fully explain the city's scale. Derinku was not an isolated case. Cappadocia is riddled with hundreds of underground complexes, many connected by long tunnels. Some extend for kilometers, suggesting a regional network rather than a single refuge. Such coordination implies long-term planning and shared knowledge across generations. Environmental factors may also have played a role. Volcanic ash formed the region's soft rock, making excavation easier. But the underground environment offered stable temperatures year-round, cool in summer, warm in winter. In a region prone to harsh climate swings, underground living provided comfort as well as protection. Still, the question lingers. Why build downward instead of upward? One theory suggests repeated invasions forced communities to adapt. Anatolia sat at the crossroads of empires, and waves of conflict swept through the region for millennia. Underground cities offered an advantage no fortress can match. Invisibility. Another possibility is catastrophe. Some researchers propose that extreme climatic events, prolonged droughts, or even volcanic eruptions may have driven populations underground temporarily, later turning emergency shelters into permanent infrastructure. What makes Derinku especially unsettling is how complete its isolation could be. Once sealed, the city left almost no sign of life above. Smoke from fires was dispersed through ventilation shafts. Waste was managed internally. Noise was muffled by layers of earth. A fully occupied city could exist just meters below unsuspecting travelers. This raises a haunting thought. How many times did entire populations vanish from the surface? Not through destruction, but by deliberate withdrawal? Religious symbolism adds another layer. Underground spaces have long been associated with rebirth, protection, and the womb of the earth. For early Christian communities, descending underground may have carried spiritual meaning, retreating from a hostile world to preserve faith until a safer time. Yet Derinku's origins predate Christianity. Its earliest builders were not escaping Roman soldiers. They were responding to challenges we may never fully understand. Despite decades of study, Large sections of the city remain unexplored or closed for safety reasons. Collapsed tunnels, unstable ceilings, and unknown chambers hint that what we see today may only be a fraction of the original complex. Durinkyu forces us to reconsider assumptions about ancient life. These people were not passive victims of circumstance. They engineered solutions on a massive scale, reshaping their environment with foresight and cooperation. They planned not just for survival, but for disappearance in a world obsessed with monuments that rise toward the sky. Durinkyu stands as a reminder that some of humanity's greatest achievements were meant never to be seen. In the highlands of West Java, Indonesia, overlooking a landscape of rolling hills and volcanic peaks, stands Gunung Padang, a site that has become one of the most controversial archaeological discoveries of the modern era. Known to locals for centuries as a place of quiet power, it was long believed to be a natural hill crowned with ancient stone terraces used for ritual gatherings. Only in recent decades did scientists begin to suspect that something far more complex lay hidden beneath the surface. Gunung Padang sits atop an extinct volcano and rises more than 800 meters above sea level. The visible structure consists of a series of stone terraces arranged in ascending platforms, connected by stairways made of andesite columns. These columns are not randomly scattered. They are deliberately placed, aligned, and stabilized, clear evidence of human design for much of the 20th century. The site was classified as a megalithic ceremonial complex dating back roughly 2,000 years. This interpretation fit comfortably within established models of Southeast Asian prehistory. But as geophysical surveys expanded and excavation techniques improved, researchers began to uncover anomalies that challenged this timeline, using ground-penetrating radar, seismic tomography, and electrical resistivity imaging. Scientists detected multiple subsurface layers beneath the visible terraces. These layers appeared to be composed of stacked stone formations arranged in patterns inconsistent with natural geology. In some areas, voids and chambers were detected, suggesting the presence of internal structures. Core drilling revealed even more surprising results. Samples extracted from deeper layers contained materials that, when radiocarbon dated, returned ages ranging from several thousand to more than 20,000 years old. Some samples suggested construction phases as early as 25,000 years ago, a time when mainstream archaeology maintains that humans lived as small, nomadic hunter groups with limited technology. If these dates reflect human activity, Gunung Padang would represent one of the oldest monumental structures ever identified. The implications are staggering. Monumental construction requires planning, social organization, and shared belief systems. It implies leadership, labor coordination, and a reason to build something that serves no immediate survival function. For such a project to exist in the distant past suggests that complex societies may have emerged far earlier than previously believed, and perhaps disappeared, without leaving obvious traces. Not all scholars accept this interpretation. Critics argue that volcanic processes could explain some of the subsurface formations. Andesite columns naturally form through cooling lava, and tectonic activity could rearrange them into misleading patterns. They also question whether the dated materials truly reflect construction or simply organic matter trapped within natural layers. The debate has grown intense. Supporters of the ancient construction theory point to the site's clear stratification. Each layer appears to represent a distinct phase of building, with different orientations and construction techniques. The deepest layers show the greatest degree of structural complexity, while the upper terraces reflect later modifications. This suggests continuity, a site revisited, rebuilt, and reinterpreted by successive cultures over vast spans of time. Local traditions support this idea. Folklore describes Gunung Padang as a place built in a single night by a legendary king, only to be abandoned for completion. While such stories are not historical evidence, they often preserve echoes of real events distorted by time. What cannot be dismissed is the site's scale. The amount of stone involved is enormous. Transporting, shaping, and placing these columns would have required coordinated labor over generations. The decision to build on a volcanic hilltop further implies knowledge of the landscape and its symbolic significance. Mountains, especially volcanic ones, have long been regarded as sacred bridges between earth and sky. Gu Nuanu Haji Padong's layout appears to align with astronomical markers. Certain terraces face cardinal directions, while others align with the setting sun during solstices. If intentional, this suggests an understanding of celestial cycles and their importance in ritual life. The presence of underground chambers raises further questions. Some researchers believe these spaces may have been used for ceremonial purposes, storage, or even as burial sites. Others speculate that the hill was engineered to stabilize itself against seismic activity, an early form of earthquake-resistant construction. What is particularly unsettling is how little evidence remains of the people who built the deepest layers. No large settlements have been found nearby that match the proposed age. No tools conclusively linked to advanced construction have been recovered from that period. It is as if the builders emerged, shaped the hill, and then vanished. One explanation is catastrophe. Southeast Asia is geologically volatile, prone to volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and rising sea levels. A sudden environmental disaster could have erased coastal settlements and scattered survivors, leaving only elevated sites like Gunung Padang intact. Another possibility is cultural transformation. Knowledge may have been lost as societies reorganized. With later inhabitants inheriting structures they no longer understood but continued to use for ritual purposes. Gunung Padang challenges the assumption that civilization develops in a straight, upward line. Instead, it suggests cycles of advancement and loss, moments of complexity followed by collapse. Memory preserved in stone but not in writing. Today, the site remains under active investigation. Political controversy, funding disputes, and academic resistance have slowed progress. Large sections remain unexcavated, protected by layers of earth and uncertainty. What lies beneath may confirm the boldest claims or force a reevaluation of them. But even in its partially revealed state, Gunung Padang stands as a reminder that the past is not fully mapped. Beneath familiar landscapes may lie stories that do not fit our expectations. Sometimes, history is not buried because it was forgotten. Sometimes it was never meant to be found. On the Salisbury Plain of southern England rises one of the most recognizable prehistoric monuments on Earth. Stonehenge appears simple at first glance, a circle of massive upright stones capped with horizontal lintels. Yet behind this apparent simplicity lies a story of extraordinary complexity, spanning more than 1,000 years of construction, cultural change, and belief. The earliest activity at Stonehenge dates back to around 3000 BC, when a circular ditch and bank were dug into the chalk landscape. This phase involved no towering stones, only earthworks and wooden posts. Even then, the site required coordinated labor and a shared purpose, suggesting it was already significant long before the stones appeared. Around 2500 BC, the monument began to transform. Massive sarsen stones, some weighing over 25 tons, were transported from quarries nearly 30 kilometers away. Even more astonishing are the smaller bluestones, sourced from the Preseli Hills in Wales, more than 200 kilometers distant. Moving such stones without wheeled vehicles or metal tools required ingenuity, manpower, and logistical planning on a scale rarely attributed to Neolithic societies. The stones were not placed randomly. The central horseshoe and outer circle align precisely with the movements of the sun. On the summer solstice, the sunrise appears directly over the heel stone, casting light into the heart of the monument. This alignment suggests a deep understanding of celestial cycles and their relationship to time, agriculture, and ritual. But Stonehenge was never alone. Across Britain and parts of Europe, thousands of megalithic structures are raised during the same broad period. Stone circles, standing stones, long barrows, and causewayed enclosures dot the landscape. Sites such as Avebury, Callanish, Carnac, and Newgrange reveal a shared architectural language, monumental stone, circular forms, and astronomical alignment. This distribution suggests a network of belief rather than isolated. Innovation, recent archaeological Research has shifted the focus from Stonehenge as a singular mystery to its role within a larger ceremonial landscape. Nearby sites, including Durrington Walls and Woodhenge, appear to have served complementary purposes. Timber structures may have been associated with the living, while stone monuments symbolize the ancestors, durable, permanent, and unchanging. Human remains found at Stonehenge complicate this picture. Cremated bones discovered in and around the monument indicate it was used as a burial site, at least during certain phases. Isotopic analysis reveals that some individuals buried there grew up far from the Salisbury Plain, suggesting pilgrimage. People traveled long distances to participate in rituals connected to the site. Why make such journeys? One theory proposes that Stonehenge functioned as a healing center. The blue stones were believed, even in medieval legends, to possess curative properties. Skeletal remains showing signs of injury or disease lend some support to this idea. If Stonehenge was seen as a place where the boundary between human and natural forces weakened, it may have attracted those seeking transformation. Another interpretation views the monument as a political and social unifier. Building Stonehenge required cooperation across communities. Shared labor on a sacred project could reinforce alliances, settle disputes, and establish a collective identity. The act of construction may have been as important as the finished structure. The megalithic tradition reflects a worldview deeply connected to cycles of sun and moon, life and death, seasons and generations. These monuments anchored time itself, marking moments that guided planting, harvesting, and ritual observance. In societies without written calendars, stone became memory, yet many questions remain unresolved. How were the stones transported with such precision? Experiments using sledges, rollers, and ropes offer possibilities, but none fully explain the efficiency implied by the monument's scale. How is knowledge transmitted across regions? The similarities between distant sites suggest communication, shared myths, or traveling specialists. What is most striking is the endurance of these monuments. While wooden structures decayed, stone circles remained. They influenced later cultures who inherited landscapes already marked as sacred. The builders of Iron Age hill forts, Roman roads, and medieval churches often positioned their structures near or atop ancient sites, perpetuating their significance. Stonehenge itself evolved over centuries. Stones were rearranged. Pits were dug and filled. The monument was never finished in the sense we imagine today. It was alive, changing as beliefs changed. This long continuity challenges modern assumptions about prehistoric people. These were not isolated tribes reacting instinctively to their environment. They were planners, observers, and symbol makers, capable of sustaining traditions across generations. The megalithic network represents one of humanity's earliest attempts to impose order on a chaotic world. By aligning stone with sky, builders created a framework through which life gained meaning. Even after their names and languages vanished, the stones continued to stand, silent witnesses to a worldview we can only partially reconstruct. Perhaps that is their true power. Stonehenge and its counterparts do not offer a single explanation. They offer endurance. In doing so, they remind us that the desire to connect with something larger than ourselves is as old as civilization and just as unresolved. More than 2,000 years ago, the Greek philosopher Plato recorded a story that would haunt human imagination ever since. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he described a vast and powerful civilization known as Atlantis, a technologically advanced society that existed long before his time. According to Plato, Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, possessed immense wealth, engineered grand cities, and commanded the sea itself. Then, in a catastrophic event, it disappeared beneath the waves. For centuries, Atlantis was dismissed as a moral allegory, a cautionary tale about hubris and divine punishment. Plato, after all, was a philosopher, not a historian. Yet what has kept the story alive is not just its drama, but its detail. Plato provided measurements, geography, social structure, and even architectural descriptions. This level of specificity feels unusual for pure metaphor. The question remains, where did Plato get this information? He claimed it came from Egyptian records, passed down to the Athenian lawgiver Solon, who learned of it from priests in the ancient city of Sais. These priests reportedly told Solon that Greek history was young, repeatedly erased by catastrophes, while Egypt preserved far older memories. Atlantis, they said, existed thousands of years earlier, long before known civilizations. Modern archaeology has never found Atlantis as Plato described it, but it has uncovered something perhaps more troubling: evidence that advanced human activity may predate accepted timelines across the globe. Submerged ruins have been discovered along coastlines now underwater. Near Japan's Yonaguni Island, massive stepped structures lie beneath the sea, resembling terraces, roads, and platforms. Off the coast of India, sonar imaging revealed geometric formations near Dwarka and the Gulf of Kamhat. In the Mediterranean, sunken harbors and cities tell stories of rising sea levels and lost land. These sites do not prove Atlantis, but they prove the ancient coastlines now lie drowned at the end of the last ice age. Around 12,000 years ago, global sea levels rose dramatically as glaciers melted. Vast areas of land were submerged. Any coastal civilizations would have been erased, their cities swallowed, their traces scattered, or buried beneath sediment. This timing is critical. It coincides with a period of abrupt climate instability, known as the Younger Dryas, sudden return to near glacial conditions followed by rapid warming. Evidence suggests massive floods, shifting ecosystems, and widespread disruption. Many cultures across the world preserve flood myths dating back to this era: Mesopotamia, India, the Americas. And beyond the consistency is striking. Could these myths preserve fragmented memories of a real global catastrophe? If so, Atlantis may not refer to a single city or empire, but to a lost world, a network of early civilizations that flourished before the flood, only to collapse when the environment turned hostile. Survivors would have carried stories, symbols, and fragments of knowledge into the post-catastrophe world. This idea finds echoes in archaeology. Sites like Göbekli Tepe, built more than 11,000 years ago, show monumental architecture created by hunter-gatherers, something once thought impossible. Gunung Padang hints at even older construction. These discoveries suggest that complex societies may have existed earlier than previously assumed. If an advanced culture did exist and was destroyed, its technological footprint would be minimal. Stone endures. Wood, textiles, and metals corrode or vanish. A coastal civilization drowned by rising seas would leave almost nothing accessible today. Atlantis then becomes a symbol, not a fantasy, but of amnesia. Ancient philosophers often spoke of cycles: creation, destruction, rebirth. Civilizations rising, falling, and rising again. Plato himself suggested that humanity had been reset multiple times by fire and flood. What survives each reset is not technology, but myth. Myth is memory compressed across cultures. We find recurring themes: a golden age, divine knowledge, sudden catastrophe, and scattered survivors who rebuild. These are not technical blueprints. They are emotional truths, preserved when facts could not be. Modern science now confirms that Earth is capable of sudden, devastating change. Climate shifts, impacts, volcanic winters, all have occurred before and will occur again. Civilization is not guaranteed permanence. Perhaps that is the real lesson behind Atlantis. Not that a perfect society once ruled the seas, but that humanity has faced extinction-level events before and forgotten. That progress is fragile. That knowledge can be lost faster than it is gained. Atlantis endures not because it was found, but because it warrants. It asks us to look at ancient ruins not as primitive beginnings, but as survivors of something older. To consider that history is not a straight line, but a series of waves, each one erasing what came before. And in that sense, Atlantis may not be lost at all. It may be beneath our feet, beneath our oceans, and beneath our assumptions, waiting for the moment when we finally realize that the past is far deeper than we were ever taught.